Hi soapsters, so in today's video I'm looking at doing some transparent soap. Now this is a technique for making a remeltable, or what's otherwise known as a melt and pour soap, from scratch using all the ingredients that you would need except for some of the bubbling agent, which you can add or you can leave out. As I'm only making this for some embeds, I left that bit out, but it didn't all go to plan, and you can see whether or not I can actually make some remeltable soap usable for embeds in the video. Let's take a look. Our first stage of making a transparent soap is actually bringing together a sugar syrup, and in the pan here we've just got granulated sugar and some distilled water that we're going to heat up very, very gently, and we're going to allow all of the granules of sugar to dissolve into the water until the final syrup is nice and crystal clear. The thing with transparent soaps is you need to make sure that every stage of your process is as clear as can possibly be. So in this setup here, we've literally just got sugar and water. We're going to bring that to a high temperature, around about 90 degrees C. We don't want it to boil because we don't really want to lose very much of that water. And we also don't want to caramelize the sugar. Those two things are really important when you're making your sugar syrup. Now, if you want to, you can use a sorbitol solution rather than making the sugar syrup, but this way it's just as easy to make a sugar syrup as to go out and buy some sorbitol. So this is the first stage of getting your sugar and your water dissolved, and as you can see, the footage that you're watching has been sped up by about 800%, so we're taking about 20 minutes 25 minutes of time. You'll notice that I'm taking it on and off of the heat pad and off of the burner, so that I'm essentially just making sure I'm not burning this sugar syrup. I just want it to dissolve very slowly, very gently, very carefully, without actually caramelizing it. So that's really important with this. Transparent ingredients mean a more transparent soap. So what I'm going to do now is bring in my fats. Now in this pan I have got stearic acid, and I've also got some lard. I wanted to try this recipe with lard rather than just purely stearic acid, and I will repeat this, I think, with just using stearic acid to see whether the lard would still give me a relatively transparent soap or whether I would get any cloudiness in there, and you'll see the results from that a little bit later on. So anyway, we've got the stearic acid and the lard in here, and there's also a little bit of coconut oil in there as well, and we're really just melting this down. Now stearic acid has a extremely high melting point. So whilst you are melting these down, just be very careful and do it nice and slowly. And if you do ever worry about melting it on a hot plate like this, you can pop all of these ingredients into a slow cooker, and that will give you a little bit more control, a little bit less direct heat, and it will save you from burning any of these ingredients. So we've got all of those oils melted down here, and I'm going to run you through, because the first mistake I made whilst making this, which I completely didn't remember from the last time I made it, is this pot is way too big. There's too much space to allow the oils to spread out. It's not contained enough, and I can't really control things cooling or heating. So I would go with a smaller, taller sided pot for doing this one, or a slow cooker. So we now move on to adding the isopropyl alcohol into the mixture here. Now, I dumped this all in and it didn't react the way that I remember it reacting, which was to kind of really fizz up. You can see there's some bubbling happening there, but that didn't really happen the last time I made it. And I think that's because I needed to have added that in quite a slow stream and incorporated it all. But we're getting a foam there. So you can see that this soap is going to have this foam to it. Now, normally within a transparent soap like this, you're going to add an ingredient called cocamidopropyl betaine, which is a surfactant and a bubbler. But I didn't have any of that available, so it's not going into this one. So this won't be a particularly bubbly recipe. But once we've got all of that kind of combined and we've got our alcohol in there, we're now going to make our lye solution. Now this only requires a small amount of lye solution, but again, you still need to respect it, still need to make sure that you have your eye protection on and that you're wearing gloves. So there's a little bit of lye here going into my water. And I'm just going to make sure that becomes clear before I then use it. And now I prefer to use these plastic bottles. They have a wide neck so I can get all of the lye and the water in there. But they have a lid that I can put onto it. So if I am leaving it for any length of time, it's in a screw topped lid. And also, because lye solution will always draw moisture into it, so if you are leaving your lye solution, once it's cooled for any length of time, make sure it is covered. And that's where these jars come in really, really useful. Now, once your lye solution has cooled to around about 65 degrees C, it's ready to go in. Now, you'll notice here when I pop that first little bit in, it just clumped and it kind of just all stayed in that kind of bottom bit and never really kind of came together. Now, I'm not entirely sure whether that was the fact that I didn't have enough depth so that the lye solution hit the bottom and just basically became these kind of lumps, or whether it's reacting with the lard in some way within this. So I am going to test this out again with coconut oil, and we'll see if we have the same reaction. You can see here it's just clumping, and this is really not what it should be looking like. It should all be kind of foaming up. We should be getting quite a heavy reaction from it, and it just doesn't seem to be wanting to play around and play ball. And this is where it all went a little bit wrong, but we're going to continue the process because we're using ingredients here that have cost us money. And currently, under the current environment where we're all struggling for money, we don't really want to be wasting stuff. So can I pull this back? Will it become a melt and pour? Will it become a re-meltable soap? And will it become a transparent soap eventually at some point in the process? Stick with me and we'll find out. So you can see there, I've gotten to the point where I was just like, do you know what? It's not working. It's become this kind of mush. It should not look like this. It should be a nice, clear looking liquid. And the liquid is the important thing here. That's fizzed up and is still a liquid soap. And it may be a little bit cloudy, but it shouldn't be these lumps. So something's gone awry, but we are going to carry on and see what we get. So our next stage is the sugar syrup. I'm going to add that into here and we're going to strain it just to get rid of all those little bits and pieces, any crystals and stuff like that. Again, we're wanting to keep this crystal clear. So the more we can kind of take anything out that would make it look smoky or fogged, we want to do that. So you can see here that all of those bits are now starting to kind of melt down a little bit. So we might save it, we might not. We will have to see how that goes. And I'm really just kind of praying to the soap gods now that this is actually going to work. It's actually going to come to do something, and we'll see. So just want to make sure I get the lovely bottom of the pan there. I'm just trying to make sure I get every single bit of that syrup out that I can. And you can see there that we're getting like a film on the top, which is fine because you can spray that with some rubbing alcohol or some isopropyl alcohol in a spray bottle and just spray the top of that. But you can see there that it's not exactly clear, although you can see the bottom of the pan just, and it's got a slight yellow tinge. The yellow tinge is easy to get rid of. You can put 1 or 2 drops of a liquid purple colour in there. That would get rid of the yellow. It's the cloudiness for me. So the next ingredient that's going in here is vegetable glycerin. Obviously, this is a glycerin soap. Re-meltable soaps, melt and pour soaps are glycerin based. So we need to get this glycerin into here as well. And you can see, but now when the glycerin normally hits, this becomes a really crystal solution. And you can see here that it is most definitely not crystal clear. It's very cloudy. It's quite muddy. And I was kind of losing a little bit of hope at this point. But let's carry on. Let's see how it's all going to go. Normally I would scrape the glycerin out, but at this point I was like, yeah, go on then. Let's just give it a scrape and see what happens. And I was feeling relatively disappointed in my heart that this was not going to work. But we're going to carry on regardless. We are soap makers. We take the rough with the smooth and we go with it, and we're just going to see what we get. So you can see here I've got some isopropyl alcohol in a spray bottle. I'm just spraying the top to kind of get rid of some of those bubbles on the top and just to see if everything is going to kind of come together. And by the looks of it, we are getting a relatively clear liquid there. So maybe it'll work, but I still think it's not really going to be the kind of crystal clear stuff that we're looking for. But we're going to keep going. keep mixing it, keep going with a whisk, and you do need to do this bit by hand. You do not need a stick blender. You want a whisk for this. It's the best way of doing it. And you see that the reactions happen very, very quickly. So a stick blender really wouldn't be of any use. But look at all those bits on the whisk. And again, we're getting that film on the top. I'm not holding out hope on this one. So in here, we have some sodium lactate. Now, sodium lactate goes into all of these. Now, this is the point when the sodium lactate hits. It should crystal clear. It's almost like a magic trick. It just goes whoomp and it clears beautifully. And that hasn't. It's like some sort of appley, saucy. It just looks awful. Normally at this point, if you're adding your sodium lactate in, you would also add in your cocamidopropyl betaine. That's how you say it. And that would then be creating your bubbles. But I only want these for embed, so I'm not that bothered about putting in the bubbler for this one. And we just stir and stir and stir and stir and stir until we're happy with it. Now, at this point, if you wanted to, you could add fragrance, but the thing with the melt and pour soap is you want to be able to use it for embed. You want to be able to change the fragrance. You add the fragrance in at a later stage as well as the colour. So I'm kind of like, well, do you know what? This is either going to be a hit or a miss. I think it's going to be a miss, but let's get it into the mould. And I've just moved the screen there. I poured it very, very close to me because it was still quite warm and I just didn't hold out very much hope for it. And we've got all of this kind of gloop in there. This is not what it should look like. But again, we're going with it. On this channel, we'll go with the good, the bad, and the ugly like this one. So there we go. And that is our block ready to go. We're going to spray the top with a little bit of rubbing alcohol just to try and get rid of some of those bubbles which do not want to go. And then we're going to pop this in the fridge. It is important that you pop this in the fridge overnight to set up fully. And we're back the next day and we're going to see what we've got from our, and it's not transparent. It's very cloudy. It's very mucky, but it has set up. So let's kind of say it has set up and let's just see whether this is going to A, remelt, and B, whether that remelting process will kick it into being more transparent. But at the moment, that's not really transparent soap. But we're going to cut a little bit off here and I want to make a heart embed, a heart column embed from this. So what I'm going to do is cut this up into little bits, pop it into my glass jar here and pop it into the microwave in short bursts to melt it down. Now, what I found is melting melt and pour soaps, or you're melting these transparent soaps that you've made, you need to do it in a glass jar really, or a glass jug. Using plastic, the soap can overheat, it can get very, very hot, and it can actually melt plastic jugs. And I find that it just melts better and you get a better looking product if you melt these down in a glass jug. So I'm going to use a microwave to melt this down, and I'm going to use very short bursts of kind of like 10 or 20 seconds, take it out, give it a little stir until you get to the point that it looks like this. Now these are powder colours and I like them for melt and pour because they are rich in colour, and you can see the tiny little put in there has given me this absolutely vivid pink, fluid, hot pink beautifulness. But I've still got a few lumps and bumps just kind of floating around in there. So this is going to have to go back into the microwave for a little while, but I've got some glitter to go in here. I think it's absolutely fine to just heat this very gently with your colour in there. It's not going to do any damage unless, of course, you overheat the entire thing and it's all over your microwave and you've got to clean the microwave out. And then the best bet there is just to let it cool and peel it off. But this does need to go back into the microwave just to melt down those large bits and just kind of make it a nice homogeneous mixture. Spray the top so you're kind of just getting rid of the bubbles, and the heat that's residual within this should realistically take out all of those large lumps. Just keep stirring it, and again, if you need to pop it back into the microwave, you can always pop it back in short bursts just to melt everything down. And then you saw me put some little bit of glitter in there. It's all melted down and I'm going to pour it into my column mould here. And I'm sorry I'm covering everything there with my hands, but all I'm doing is pouring all of that into the column mould. And then when I take my hand away here in a moment, you'll see how full I've taken that column mould. Right to the top, and then spray a little bit of that onto the top of it. It will drop down a little bit because obviously as soap cools, it's going to contract. And then we'll come back tomorrow for the cut of the end of this embed. And we're back the next day, and here we have the embed. Has it changed? Is it clearer? What's going on? It's looking quite good from that end. So let's see what we've actually got in here, because we may have salvaged this. This may be usable melt and pour soap. And let's take that off. Now you can see just along the kind of bottom edge of the heart, there are some kind of lumpy bits. And I think this is where the lard in the recipe has reacted with the steric and the coconut a little bit more than the other ingredients. So we're going to give this another go and see if we can get some nice clear stuff. But if I take a relatively thin sliver off the end here, and let's have a look at this to the camera. There we go. And actually, we have got a relatively transparent soap. So let me just bring a little bag in here. And you'll see if I hold that and then I pop the thin slice over, you can just about see through my transparent soap. So we eventually got a transparent soap, even though I absolutely failed at the full technique and I didn't get it right and it wasn't transparent and it didn't come out transparent, but it has produced a re-meltable soap that I can put colours into that produce a really nice, vibrant soap that I can use as an embed. So ultimately my goal succeeded. So much so that I went in to make some purple ones, and I've made a purple heart as well, which we used in another video. And I think the thing to take away from this is, regardless of how experienced you are, you can make mistakes. And sometimes you just have to follow through with that mistake and follow the recipe and follow the instructions and come out with something at the end that you might think, well, that's no good. Or you might come out at the end and go, oh my goodness me, I've learnt so much from that. If I do it again, I'm going to change this and I'm going to change that. And you may come out at the end with something that is usable for what you need it to be, and it's absolutely fine. Or you come out at the end of it with something that you think, I'm not sure what to do with that. And you can always use those soaps as embeds. You can cut them up. You can use them as the basis for other soaps. There's lots of things you can do with soaps that don't necessarily turn out the way you want them to, but you've been through the process, you've learnt from the process, and you have a better understanding of how to move forward the next time. So I think that's my takeaway from this one. And just to say to people, even those of us that have been soaping for years still have those days where it just doesn't go right. And that's absolutely fine. You carry on with it. You get to the end of it. You get something that you can look at, you can review, you can read back on your notes and think, right, I'm not going to do that again, or I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do something else. And ultimately, you may come out at the end of it with something that is a beautiful purple colour, even though it looked very, very dark. So hopefully this has helped those of you that think, oh, I couldn't do that. Yes, you can. And the other thing I will say is that make melt and pour soap from scratch, and then tell me that melt and pour soap makers are not talented soap makers, because they really are when you have to actually make it and work with it yourself. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me grow and allows me to make more videos and tutorials for all of you. When you subscribe, don't forget to click the bell icon if you'd like to get notified when a new video is uploaded. And thanks a lot, Soapsters. I'll see you again next time.